Hello, my dear students. Welcome back to English Mastery Hub. I'm Logan, and I'm so happy to have you here with me today. I hope you're doing well and feeling excited about learning English. Today's lesson is something very special because it's all about a moment that many of you dream about. The moment when you realize you are fluent in English. Yes, I'm talking about that day when you realize you can speak, understand, and think in English without any struggle. Now, I know some of you might feel that becoming fluent in English is a long and difficult journey. But trust me, it's absolutely possible. And the best part is, you can experience that aha moment when you realize just how far you've come. Today, I'm going to share with you the story of when I realized I was fluent in English. And I'll break it down into simple steps that you can follow to get to that point yourself. So, if you're ready to hear my story and learn how you can become fluent, make sure to subscribe to English Mastery Hub. That way, you'll never miss a lesson that helps you on your journey to becoming a confident and fluent English speaker. Let's get started with today's lesson, the day I realized I was fluent in English. Before we talk about the moment I realized I was fluent in English, let's take a step back and understand what fluency really means. Fluency isn't about knowing every single word in English. It's not about memorizing all the grammar rules or being able to use big words in every sentence. Fluency is about being able to communicate easily and confidently. It's about speaking and understanding English in real-life situations. When you're fluent, you don't feel lost or frustrated because you can use the language smoothly. Fluency is not just about how many words you know. It's more about how well you can use the words you already know. It's about being able to speak without thinking too much, understand others without translating, and use the language naturally in everyday situations. And that's exactly what I want for you. I want you to feel confident when you speak English, and I want you to be able to understand English when others speak to you. That's fluency. To be honest, it didn't happen overnight for me. I didn't wake up one day and suddenly speak perfect English. Fluency took time and practice. At first, I felt slow and unsure when I spoke. I had to think carefully about every word. But I noticed small changes over time. Little by little, I began to feel more comfortable with the language. I started understanding English better, and I could speak more easily. And then, one day, it hit me. Just like that. I realized that I had become fluent. When I first started learning English, I had to stop and think about every sentence. I would translate from my native language into English. This made speaking and understanding difficult. Sometimes I would forget words, or I would speak slowly because I had to think about what to say next. But then something amazing happened. One day, I was talking to a friend in English, and suddenly, I noticed that I wasn't stopping to think. My words were coming out naturally, without translation. I was speaking in English without thinking about it. My brain wasn't working in two languages anymore. I was using English directly, and it felt amazing. It felt like I could speak without effort, and the words came to me without hesitation. This was the first sign that I was becoming fluent. I wasn't just learning English. I was using it naturally, as if it was my first language. It was a great feeling to realize that I was thinking and speaking in English without needing to translate every word. At first, I didn't realize how much progress I had made. But when I stopped to think about it, I could see the change. I was able to talk about simple things easily, and I didn't feel frustrated by the language anymore. This was a big step for me. It made me feel proud of how far I had come. Let's talk about the stages I went through to become fluent in English. These stages don't happen in a day, but each one is an important step toward fluency. And the good news is, you can do the same thing. Just keep practicing, and you will see these changes too. The first sign that I was becoming fluent in English was when I realized I was speaking without thinking. In the beginning, I had to stop and think about every sentence. I would translate each word from my native language into English, and this made me slow. I would think, how do I say this in English? Or, what's the right word? This made it harder to keep the conversation going smoothly. But then one day, I was talking to a friend in English, and I noticed something different. I wasn't stopping to think. I wasn't translating anymore. The words were coming out naturally, and I was able to speak faster. I was just talking in English, like I would in my native language. I was no longer translating every word in my mind. It felt amazing. This was the first big sign that I was becoming fluent. I was able to express myself without hesitation. I didn't need to pause and think. The language was starting to come to me naturally. This was a big moment because it meant that my brain had started thinking in English, not translating from my first language. At this point, I realized I wasn't just learning English. I was using it to talk and express myself in real-life situations. This made me feel more confident in my ability to speak English. It made me excited to keep going, to keep learning, and to keep practicing. Practice. Tip: try talking to yourself in English for 5 minutes every day. Don't stop to translate. Just speak about whatever comes to your mind. It could be something simple like what you see around you or what you plan to do later. The key is not to think about the translation. Just let the words come out in English. This will help you start speaking naturally, just like I did. Remember, it's okay if you make mistakes at first. The important thing is to keep practicing and to not worry about making everything perfect. Fluency comes with time and practice, so don't rush. Enjoy the process and celebrate the small steps forward. You're learning, and that's what matters most. When I reached this stage, I felt like I had taken a huge step toward fluency. It was an amazing feeling to realize that I could speak English without thinking about every word. I was communicating with ease, and it felt like I had unlocked a new level of language learning. I knew that I was on the right path, and that made me feel more motivated to continue practicing and improving. This stage is one of the most important steps in becoming fluent in any language. When you start thinking and speaking in English without translating, you know you're getting closer to fluency. It's not about being perfect. It's about being able to communicate easily and confidently. And that's exactly what happened to me. So, to recap, the first sign of fluency was when I realized I was speaking without thinking. This was a turning point for me. It showed me that I was no longer just learning English. I was using it naturally. I was thinking and speaking in English just like I would in my native language. I want you to reach this stage too. Keep practicing and don't worry if it takes time. Fluency will come, and I believe you can do it. Keep going, and remember, every step you take brings you closer to your goal of speaking English fluently. Keep up the great work. The second moment that made me realize I was fluent in English was when I noticed how easily I could understand others. At the beginning of my learning journey, I would often need to pause and think when I heard someone speaking English. I had to translate the words from English into my native language, which slowed me down and made it hard to keep up with the conversation. But then something changed. One day, I was listening to people speak, and I realized I understood everything immediately. I didn't have to translate in my mind anymore. I could understand what they said without thinking, and it felt amazing. I started noticing this more and more. For example, one day I was sitting in a cafe, and a stranger asked me a question in English. Normally, this would have made me nervous, and I would have spent time thinking about what they said. But that day, I understood the question right away. I didn't need to pause or translate in my head. I just heard the words, understood them, and answered quickly, without thinking. It felt so natural and easy. I wasn't struggling to find the right words or trying to figure out what they meant. It was like having a conversation in my own language. This moment was really important for me. It showed that I wasn't just learning English. I was starting to think and understand it naturally. I wasn't using my native language as a bridge to understand English anymore. I was listening to English and understanding it directly. That was a big turning point for me in my journey toward fluency. Before this, I had to stop and think. When someone spoke to me, I would translate the words and then try to respond. But now, listening to English didn't feel hard. I was able to hear the words and understand them quickly. My brain was processing the language in real time, just like it does with my native language. This made speaking and understanding English feel more natural, and I didn't have to think as much. This step is really important in becoming fluent. It's not just about speaking well, it's about understanding English in real time. When you can listen and understand without translating, you'll be able to have faster and smoother conversations. This is a big sign that you're becoming fluent. To practice this, try listening to simple English conversations every day. There are many podcasts and videos available online that you can listen to. Start with simple content that matches your current level, and try not to look at subtitles or translations. Just focus on what you hear and see how much you can understand. Even if you don't understand everything, that's okay. The goal is to practice your listening skills so that you can get better over time. At first, it might be hard to understand everything, but don't give up. The more you listen, the better you'll become at understanding English. And over time, you'll start to notice that it becomes easier to understand conversations in English. This will help you feel more confident in your ability to speak and understand English. Another helpful tip is to listen to the same conversation or podcast more than once. Sometimes, listening to something again helps you catch words or phrases that you missed the first time. You can also try to listen to content that's related to things you enjoy, like your favorite hobbies, so that you already know some of the vocabulary. This will help make it easier to understand. The more you listen, the more your brain will get used to understanding English. Just like when you were learning to speak, practice makes perfect. And as you get better at understanding English, you will also feel more confident in your speaking ability. Another great practice is to try to respond quickly to what you hear. If you listen to a podcast or a conversation, imagine that you are a part of it. After hearing a sentence or a question, try to respond quickly in English, just like you would in a real conversation. Don't worry about making mistakes. Just focus on getting your thoughts out in English. It can be helpful to practice this in a relaxed setting. You don't need to put pressure on yourself. Listen to English content for a few minutes every day and see how much you can understand. With time, you will start to notice that it becomes easier and faster to understand what others are saying. When I first started understanding English without translating, it felt like a huge achievement. It was one of the moments when I knew I had made real progress in my learning. I could understand everything in real time, and it made conversations feel more natural. I could focus more on responding to people instead of thinking about what they said or how to say something in English. That's why this step is so important in your journey to fluency. When you can listen and respond quickly in English, you are getting closer to using the language just like a native speaker. You'll find that conversations flow more easily, and you'll feel more comfortable speaking in different situations. So, my advice to you is to practice listening as much as possible. Make it a daily habit. Listen to English content, try not to translate, and focus on understanding what's being said. Over time, you'll see huge improvements in your ability to understand and respond in English. And remember, the more you practice, the more confident you'll become in your ability to use the language in everyday situations. You're doing great, and I'm excited to see how far you'll go in your learning journey. Keep it up. One of the biggest breakthroughs for me came when I realized I was thinking in English, not just speaking it. It was a normal day, and I was walking in the park. I was looking at the trees, the people, and the sky. Without even trying, I started thinking about everything in English. I wasn't thinking in my native language first, and then translating it into English. My mind was already thinking in English, naturally and directly. This was a huge moment for me. It felt like I had crossed an important line in my learning journey. It showed me that English was no longer just a language I had to study and learn. It had become part of my everyday thinking. I didn't need to translate my thoughts into English anymore. They were already in English. And when this happens, you know you have reached a level of fluency. In the beginning, learning English was hard. I had to think about how to say things, and I would often translate from my first language into English. This slowed me down and made me nervous. I was always worried about making mistakes because I had to carefully choose every word. But after some time, this changed. I started to notice that I was thinking in English during normal moments of my day. It felt so much easier and more natural. I remember one day when I was walking in the park, just enjoying the fresh air. I looked at the trees and started thinking, the trees are tall and green. There are people walking. The sky is clear and blue. I wasn't thinking in my native language first and then translating. I was just describing the world around me in English, without even thinking about it. It felt so natural and amazing. This moment showed me that my English skills had grown to a point where I didn't have to translate anymore. I had reached a level of fluency where I could think in English. It was no longer just about speaking English. It was about having English be part of how I saw the world. It was a big moment because it meant that I was really using English in my daily life, not just when I was speaking with others. The process of thinking in English didn't happen overnight. It took time, practice, and patience, but it was such a great feeling when it finally happened. It showed me that I was becoming more and more fluent in English. I didn't need to worry about translating anymore. I could just think and speak naturally in English. When you start thinking in English, you stop feeling like you have to work hard to speak. Instead, words come to you quickly and easily. You don't need to stop and translate every word or sentence. You can just speak freely and understand others without thinking in your own language first. This is a sign that you're becoming truly fluent in English. If you want to reach this level of fluency, you need to practice thinking in English every day. It's an important step in the process of learning a new language. Try to think in English for a few minutes each day. You can start by describing simple things around you. For example, when you're walking outside, think about what you see. The sky is blue. The sun is shining. The birds are flying. When you're doing chores, try to describe the things you're doing. I'm cleaning the dishes. I'm washing the clothes. Even when you're relaxing, try to think in English. I'm sitting on the couch. I feel comfortable. The room is quiet. It's okay if it feels hard at first. It takes time and practice. But little by little, you'll start to notice that thinking in English becomes easier. You won't have to stop and translate every time. Your brain will start using English naturally, just like you use your first language. And this is a huge step toward becoming fluent in English. The more you practice thinking in English, the faster you'll improve. The key is to make it a habit. Every day, try to think in English for a few minutes. Over time, this will help you think and speak more quickly and confidently. It will also help you understand English better because you will be thinking in English instead of translating. Sometimes it can be helpful to challenge yourself. Try to think in English while doing different activities, like when you're driving, cooking, or even relaxing at home. The more you practice thinking in English, the better you'll get at it. You'll start to feel like English is part of your everyday life, not something you have to study or translate. Thinking in English is a powerful tool for improving your fluency. When you think in English, you're not just learning words or phrases, you're learning to use the language in real-life situations. This is when you truly start to feel like a fluent English speaker. If you keep practicing thinking in English, you will see great progress. It will help you speak more naturally, understand better, and feel more confident in your ability to communicate in English. Keep going and don't give up. With time, you'll reach a level of fluency where English feels like second nature. Remember, fluency is not just about speaking, it's about thinking, understanding, and living in the language. When you start thinking in English, you know you're on the right track. Keep practicing, and soon enough, you'll find yourself speaking and thinking in English without even trying. You're doing great, and every step forward brings you closer to fluency. Keep it up. The final step for me in realizing I was fluent in English came when I could speak in long conversations without hesitation. At the beginning of my learning journey, I was very afraid of making mistakes. I would always pause and think before I spoke. If I made a mistake, I would stop and correct myself. It felt like I was always worrying about saying things perfectly. But one day, something changed. I was talking with a friend in English. We were chatting about everyday things, like our plans for the weekend and what we were doing that day. I remember it clearly. I was speaking naturally, without stopping every few seconds to think about what I wanted to say. I wasn't worried about making mistakes anymore. I wasn't focusing on whether my grammar was perfect, or if I was saying everything exactly right. Instead, I was just talking, enjoying the conversation, and focusing on the message I wanted to share. This was the moment I realized I had truly become fluent in English. I wasn't afraid of making mistakes anymore. I was speaking just like a native speaker. I was not thinking about the rules of grammar or trying to be perfect. I was simply focusing on expressing my ideas clearly, and that felt amazing. When you become fluent, you start to feel more comfortable in conversations. You don't worry about small mistakes because you know they are part of the learning process. Everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers. The most important thing is to keep talking and keep practicing. The more you speak, the more confident you will feel. Over time, you'll start to speak with more fluency and confidence, just like I did. Fluency is not about speaking perfectly. It's about being able to express yourself without fear. It's about communicating clearly and naturally, even if you make some mistakes along the way. Native speakers don't worry about grammar or vocabulary when they speak. They just talk. That's what it means to speak like a native. When I started speaking with confidence, I realized how much I had grown. I could talk about anything, from simple topics to more complex ones, without feeling lost or unsure. I could speak freely with friends, family, and even strangers, all without thinking too much about the words I was using. It felt like I had truly mastered the language. The key to speaking confidently is practice. The more you practice speaking, the easier it becomes. You don't need to be perfect to communicate well. What matters most is that you keep practicing, keep talking, and keep improving. Every time you speak, you get better. One way to build confidence in speaking is to have regular conversations with others. Whether it's with a friend, a teacher, or even a language partner, having conversations is one of the best ways to practice. The more you practice speaking in real situations, the more natural it will feel. And the more natural it feels, the more confident you will become. Another important tip is to stop worrying about making mistakes. Mistakes are a normal part of learning. Everyone makes them, and they help you learn. Even native speakers make mistakes sometimes. The important thing is to keep speaking, even if you make a mistake. The more you practice, the fewer mistakes you'll make over time. But even if you make mistakes, don't let them stop you from speaking. The more you speak, the more fluent you will become. Speaking in English will also help you improve other skills, like listening and understanding. When you practice speaking, you become more used to the rhythm and flow of the language. You start to feel more comfortable listening to others speak, and it becomes easier to understand what they are saying. It's a cycle. Practice speaking, and it helps you listen better. Listening more will help you speak better too. As you continue to practice speaking, you will also notice that your vocabulary grows. You'll start to use more words and phrases that you didn't know before. And the more words you know, the easier it will be to express your ideas. Speaking becomes less difficult because you can use the words and phrases that feel most natural to you. It's also important to remember that fluency is a journey, not a destination. You don't suddenly become fluent in one day. It happens little by little through practice and experience. And even after you feel fluent, you will still learn new things. There is always something new to learn in English, but that's what makes it exciting. Every conversation, every new word you learn helps you grow as a speaker. When you speak confidently, it opens up so many doors. You can make new friends, travel, share your ideas, and experience new cultures. Being fluent in English gives you the freedom to connect with people from all over the world. And that's what makes language learning so special. It helps you connect with others and understand the world in new ways. So don't be afraid to speak. The more you practice, the more confident you will become. You might make mistakes, and that's okay. Just keep talking and enjoy the process. Speaking fluently takes time, but with patience and practice, you will get there. Keep believing in yourself, and remember that confidence is the key to speaking like a native. You are already doing great, and every conversation you have is a step closer to your goal. Practice. Tip: don't be afraid to make mistakes. The more you practice speaking, the more confident you'll become. Keep having conversations with others and enjoy the process. You're doing great, and the more you speak, the better you will get. So, there you have it. Those were the stages I went through when I realized I was fluent in English. Speaking without thinking, understanding conversations easily, thinking in English, and speaking with confidence. These moments were big turning points for me, and I hope they help you understand the process of becoming fluent in English. Now, I want you to know that fluency is not a destination. It's a process. It's not something that happens all at once, and it's not about being perfect. It's about progress and practice. The more you practice, the closer you'll get to that aha moment when you realize, I'm fluent in English. Keep practicing every day, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Remember, every mistake is a step toward fluency. It's okay to make mistakes, and they are part of the learning process. The important thing is to keep going and never give up. Thank you for joining me today on English Mastery Hub. I hope you found this lesson helpful and that it gave you some ideas on how to measure your own progress in English. If you enjoyed this video and want to keep learning with me, make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new lesson. Keep working hard, stay confident, and always believe in yourself. You've got this, and I believe in you. I'll see you in the next video. Keep practicing and remember that every step forward is a step closer to your goal.